what are your predictions for the season? And I guess, we'll kick it off with maybe a record prediction, and then we'll go into a team MVP and probably a couple breakout players.
Yeah, I mean, record prediction, I kind of probably spoiled it a little bit, you know, kind of reacting to Grant's record prediction. Um, what I meant to say to him was I appreciate his honesty. I wouldn't have blamed him at all. I know myself. If I were on some guy's channel and like he's a big Raider fan, and he just asked me like, what are you thinking? Like I know I'll see a random Raider fan. I'll be wearing a Raider hat at work or something, and it's like, oh, go Raiders, let's go. And it's like, if we start chatting it up, it's like, oh man, I think we can make the playoffs this year. Yeah, for sure. But deep down, my feeling is,
deep down, you're like, man, I just lied to that man's face.
Well, I mean, if I had to give a prediction, I'm probably sitting at like right around 500. It's probably 8-9 or 9-8. But I could see a really bad scenario where it's like something for some reason the rate. I don't know if it's like everybody's talking about, oh, are the Raiders going to trade Devontae? What if they do, right? And then maybe they start like around 500, but the quarterback play is just horrendous. He demands a trade. They trade him, and then it goes from around 500 to around 250, right? And they're winning a quarter of their games. Then we have a problem, obviously. But and I can also see the scenario where they're just this tough, play hard for their coach football team, and the quarterback is just playing point guard, just getting it to the players, and being a field general or whatever you want to call them, and they get it done, whoever the quarterback is, and they win 10 games, and they squeak their way into the playoffs as the 7th seed. Like, to me, I think the 7th, maybe the 6th seed is the best case scenario for this current team with this current quarterback situation, this current offensive line, this current running game, and so forth. It's really, I know it's not exactly, but it really is year one of Antonio Pierce's tenure as the coach, as well as Tom Telesco's tenure at GM. And usually it takes a couple years to get it really in gear. Some teams just luck out where they have a solid roster and the coach comes in. The Houston Texans, right, with DeMeco Ryans, he got put into the perfect scenario. He built up the defense because he's a defensive-minded coach, right? But he was in position, 2nd overall pick, got the quarterback, and got the right one, right? I wish that the Raiders could be in that position, but we know what it takes to get there, right? We've talked about that multiple times in this show.
Take your medicine.
Take your medicine. And, I mean, there's a dark part of me that's sitting here with all this bad vibes and this quarterback room where there's a part of me that's like, they probably should take their medicine and just, I'm not saying they should tank, but at some point they got to get their quarterback. And if it's not going to be Dak, which bear in mind, like, all right, the Raiders come out of this season, whatever it is, 7 wins, 10 wins, 5 wins, whatever it is, if they come out of this going, wow, I really hope we get Dak in free agency, there are multiple aspects as to why that could not happen. And as far as a free agent quarterback, Dak is one of one. We're not going to be the only competitors trying to be his suitor in free agency, right? There's going to be a market for him, and it's going to be driven up by the competition to where we talked about Purdy getting paid. Dak might be looking at 60 plus, 65 million next offseason per year. Are the Raiders really in the right position to do that? Whereas you can just, as we said, take your medicine, get a top 5 draft pick, and hopefully there's a good quarterback there. I haven't looked too much into quarterbacks in next year's draft. I've heard it's not that good, but just something I thought about because I've seen mock drafts, way too early mock drafts on Twitter and stuff. And I think the top quarterback right now, as far as projections, you hear a lot about Deion Sanders' son, whose first name for some reason I'm totally forgetting right now. Shedeur Sanders from Colorado. But I think the current projected top quarterback might be Carson Beck from Georgia. And what's interesting about that to me is we just drafted Georgia's star tight end, Brock Bowers. So I wonder if that might be somewhere the Raiders might like to go next year. But it's not like you can just pre-plan for that unless you tank. But teams don't actually tank. Go ahead.
You know what's the problem though? So, we've talked about, the Raiders just sometimes they need to take their medicine. They need to lose these games in order to get that quarterback. Right now, the Raiders are not in a position to where they are able to tank. Unless you're a Raider fan and you don't necessarily care about Antonio Pierce, or you think that, Mark Davis can hire somebody else to do it. But if you like Antonio Pierce as a Raider fan, I don't think that he can afford to tank, because if he landed the first overall pick, I'm not confident that Mark Davis would be willing to give Antonio Pierce a whole nother season to, prove that he is an NFL head coach.
You know what that would remind me of is like a Romeo Crennel or Lovie Smith with the Texans.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was with the Texans. Like there have been a select few coaches where they get the job for 1 year, their team sucks, and then they get let go for like a bigger name coach, and their team is better positioned, to in the draft and whatnot. And
Yeah.
they might have a lot of money in free agency. I can see that. I really can. And it's unfortunate because, coming out of last season, I was all in on Pierce, but vibes are vibes, and right now my vibes are low, and it's like, well, if that happened next off season, at the end of the day, for me, it's just what is best for the team. As much as I like Antonio Pierce, not only for this franchise, but just as a coach, as a person, and his embodiment of this franchise, if he's not the best thing for this franchise, I will have no problem with him getting let go next year. But in a perfect world, he doesn't get let go because he just continues to show the players play hard for him, and whatever they do, I mean, maybe they trade up in the draft next year. I have no idea. Maybe they do win 10 games and they trade up, they get that quarterback, they keep a Aiden O'Connell to start until that quarterback's ready, and suddenly it's like, man, this team is positioned where in a season, so not 25, but 2026, they look legit. But it's going to take at least that much time to get there if they don't have the quarterback right now. And again, that goes into the vibes. So to answer the question at hand of record prediction, I think my realistic record prediction is 8-9. I think that's my realistic prediction. But again, like ceiling 10 games, floor 5. I think the Las Vegas betting is like 6.5 wins over under. So maybe 6, not 5, but 6. Yeah.
Real quick, I have the spreadsheet, pulled up where we did predictions, for the Raiders schedule. No, we did this when the schedule came out. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read off what our floors, what our predictions, and what our ceilings are. And then we can give like a little quick update and we can just kind of document it. But in May 16th, your floor was 7 wins and your ceiling was 12 wins, but your prediction was 11-6. And I think maybe you went, I have something in parentheses, a little bit more realistically, 9-8.
Oh, okay.
Cool. I think we're both probably going to switch that, because I also have like a 9-8 in parentheses. My floor was 6 wins. My ceiling was 12 wins, and my prediction was 10-7 with 9-8 in parentheses. I think we talked about it after the show and probably said, yeah, I'm not feeling as confident about that.
Yeah, that again, if they're gonna get to double-digit wins, they have to be a hard-fought team week in and week out. They also need to keep it consistent. And my problem with this quarterback situation is I just can't envision them being consistent with Gardner Minshew as the starting quarterback. So,
So what would you say is the floor for this team?
I'll say 6 wins.
You think that's
I think
the very
Yeah, I think regardless, they're going to be a hard fought team. I don't see Antonio Pierce losing the locker room. If anything, like I mentioned on the last pod, the one issue I have with him right now is that he came out before the draft and said, or even for agency, and said, we can't have a band-aid quarterback. We can't have a situation where we're just, stuck with this guy for a year or something, and, we don't have a long-term fix at the position. He said that, and then the Raiders proceeded to come out and put a Band-Aid at quarterback in Gardner Minshew, and obviously Aiden O'Connell was his backup. That's the definition of like a Band-Aid quarterback, of like, he's not going to suddenly become Kenny Stabler. He's just going to be, a Jameis Winston, like a guy who should be a backup. He's just a high-end backup. But that doesn't mean because he's a high-end backup, he's going to win games a lot. He's going to be inconsistent. That's my one issue, is just that he acknowledges, the head coach, we can't have like a short-term fix at quarterback. We have to have a long-term fix in place. And the team, aka Tom Telesco, proceeded to not get a long-term fix this offseason. But what I was getting to was, I don't see Antonio Pierce losing the locker room. I can see the quarterback situation losing at least one certain player, which would be Davante Adams. And if Davante Adams were to become vocal in, I want to get the hell out of here, that is when you could start losing the team. But I don't think it'll be Antonio Pierce's fault. I think in a way, that's a Tom Telesco thing. And I wouldn't exactly fault Telesco. Like, Grant Cohn was talking about, like, what's the plan here at quarterback? I've heard a lot of people, suspect, like, maybe Michael Penix was the plan. Like, if they had good intel or whatever, that we think Bo Nix is the Broncos guy, and it sure turns out that it was. And Sean Payton's been running his mouth about, like, oh, we tricked this team and we tricked this team into not trading up for Bo Nix. Shut up, okay? The Vikings, I think their guy was McCarthy. But nobody expected the Falcons to go for Penix. Were the Raiders sitting there like, that's going to be our guy? And then he gets sniped. And then it's like, I guess we're going top player available. Like, that's cool. I appreciate it. But now there's no plan. And it was too late, because obviously the draft is after free agency, right? So they got the Band-Aid quarterback in Gardner Minshew. But they might have hoped to have gotten a certain guy in the first round. And I know there was a lot of talk. I'm not trying to ramble, but I know there was a lot of talk about them trying to trade up to number 2, because I think their guy really was Jaden Daniels, because of the connection with Antonio Pierce and just for how good of a quarterback I think he really is going to be. But that was just unrealistic, because the number 2 team, Washington, they weren't going to leave that. Like, they're in that position. They took the medicine. That's when you need to take their quarterbacks. They did. Patriots at 3, they took their quarterback because they're in the position to do it. The Raiders either need to be in that position, trade up to do so, but it takes 2 to tango there, or you sign a guy for way too much money. So,
yeah. Joel says, I don't see us losing enough games to pick high. We are going to have to trade up in the draft, to draft a quarterback or pay Dak. It's funny how Dak is just linked to the Raiders, because I think we can all predict, I don't think Jerry Jones is going to give Dak a max extension. He could, but I feel like, the reason why he hasn't so far is because they were maybe anticipating they could get something from Trey Lance to see if he could develop into their long-term guy, because that's what he spoke about last year when they traded for him. Right. So right now, Jerry Jones just broke the bank for CeeDee Lamb. Do you anticipate that that Dak is going to get extended there, or you think his asking price is going to be too much and he'll have to test free agency?
Well, I think, coming out of the preseason game with the Niners and Raiders game, I remember when Purdy got intercepted, when he targeted Deebo Samuel, Sam Webb deflects the pass, Chris Smith intercepts it. The big talk was like, man, Deebo cannot separate. And I know I'm a little off topic right now, but I'll get there. The reaction was, man, Ayuk's probably sitting there like, see, this is why you need me, right? So I think in relation to Dak, Trey Lance had a good game against the Raiders and then proceeded the following week to have a 5 interception game. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to take a shit on the dude, but that's reason enough. Like if the Cowboys were serious, and I can at least admit, like, hey, doing a 4th-round flyer on Trey Lance of like, hey, if he could become a guy, it's worth it. Absolutely. But now you've had 2 seasons of training camp with him, or at least preseason with him, and he, you know, his finale in this preseason is a 5 interception game where he got the entire game against second and third stringers. 5 interceptions. Dak Prescott is probably sitting there going, thank God. Thank God. If they really were serious about that, of like, yeah, Lance could be our backup plan. I think he could be a great backup. There's no chance in hell that the Cowboys come out of this and want to be taken seriously. If they let Dak walk, don't draft a quarterback and go, well, it's either Cooper Rush or Trey Lance, they would be in the exact same situation as the Raiders right now. And they would be the fucking joke of the NFL, because that's what it currently is for the Raiders.
Well, I think the difference is, and this is just my opinion, feel free to disagree. I think Trey Lance has shown flashes of where he can be a dynamic starter in the NFL. He just has not been able to consistently put it together. And, this will be the last thing that I say. Those 4 out of those 5 interceptions were all on him. They were horrible. They were really bad. There was one that got ripped out of the receiver's hands, that maybe you can maybe kind of put the blame, but it wasn't the worst interception that I've seen. But he threw 49 passes in that game. So I mean, I can't defend 5 interceptions, but at least it wasn't like 5 interceptions out of 20 throws,
Right.
At least it was like nearly 50 throws, and that's still 10%. That's bad, right?
Yeah.
Like one interception practically for every 10 throws is bad.
Yeah.
But
I think the positive to take from that is simply the Cowboys giving him his snaps.
Yeah.
I really think that's the positive. And them getting as much of a look at him as possible.
I don't think it was enough for Jerry Jones, I think, to say, you know what, we're ready to move on from Dak right now and give the team over to Trey. I don't think so. So, Dak being linked to the Raiders, I mean, it's all up to Jerry Jones if he's going to let Dak go, but I could 100% see him as a Raider.
Yeah. I'll even add, I think the 5 interception performance doesn't automatically mean like the Cowboys should just whatever, we'll let Trey walk in free agency if he's a free agent after this season. Like, I still think he's a fine backup for them, and they can keep trying to, build him. It's just, I would say the negative with the Cowboys looking at Dak here is all right, I think he's 35. Maybe he's 32, but he's in the 30s. He might be 33. I think he's 33. If you can confirm that right now for me.
He's 31.
Oh, he's 30. All right, well. All right, then he's fine. He's fine. I don't know why I thought he was 33. He doesn't look it, so that makes sense. Well, shoot that in the foot right there. Anyways.
Yeah. Unsubscribe from the channel. Show's over. Mike didn't have his facts.
I'm probably thinking of some other quarterback. I don't know. Point being, what I was all.
Here's the thing: he's been starting for a very long time, because he was playing at the same time as Tony Romo, and Tony Romo is long retired. He's an announcer, got a huge contract announcing. The whole I guess timing of the NFL is kind of crazy. Dak and Ezekiel Elliott, I want to say, were rookies at the same time, and Ezekiel Elliott is a washed running back now.
Yeah.
But running backs age a lot quicker.
Yes. And a 31-year-old quarterback, in the exact opposite way of what I was going to say, a 31-year-old quarterback, if he's at the top of his game, which Dak is right now, that's perfectly fine to give a 4-year deal. It's just, if he was 33, I could see the Cowboys being like, should we invest 4 years into that? But long story short, Dak is one of one as far as a potential free agent next year. If the Raiders are looking to go, if they go 10 wins, right? And it's like, oh, we should go for the free agent quarterback. It's like, well, if Dak gets re-signed or signs to another team, you're shit out of luck again. And then it's like, well, we have to trade up. And again, it takes two to tango. So if the second overall pick is just like, no, hell no, we want our guy here, then you are back in the same scenario as what we just went through this offseason.
I know we talked about it on the phone and we haven't mentioned it on the podcast, but if the Jaguars, I mean, have they decided whether or not they're going to pick up Mac Jones's 5th-year option? Because if they're not, Mac Jones might be a free agent, and he completed like 70% of his passes this preseason, or at least he did up to through the first 2 games. I'm not saying Mac Jones is the answer, but like in terms of first round reclamation projects,
Yeah, I guess the whole point to all of this is like, if we're not going to get a Dak or draft a quarterback, no matter what, I'm going to feel like we're in the same position as we are right now. Like, I guess last week when I was talking about Mac Jones, my thought process was, well, we're kind of stuck here. It's not like we're just going to magically get a young quarterback on our team unless you could trade for Trey Lance. But even then, it's not like I expect him within 3 weeks to become a top 10 quarterback. No, at best for him, it's going to take 3 years at this point. But regardless, I would want a Mac Jones right now to figure out, all right, who's the best guy? Who do we keep? But no matter what, like, again, I don't see anybody like that becoming the next who's a former Kurt Warner, of like off the street star quarterback. It just doesn't happen anymore. Very rare. Brock Purdy would be the most recent one.
Yeah,
of
I was like
7th round guy, but that might have been no discredit to Purdy. He makes insane plays, but that could also be a situational thing of like Shanahan, the top heavy roster, and so forth. And also quarterbacks getting injured and him getting an opportunity alone, right? But point being, the Raiders need to figure out the quarterback in the long term, not in the short term. I'm tired of short term things. The whole point of getting off of Derek Carr was we need to find a new long term quarterback, and they still need to do that. But moving off of, I would say, record predictions, what do you think we should go into?
Real quick, so what would you say is the new ceiling? Or do you want to keep the ceiling, and do you want to change your prediction for the record?
Oh, I mean, I would say my prediction. It's so hard because I feel like this is the optimistic side of it. Is like this team is definitely better than last season, like bar none. That's the weird thing. Is like I'm trying to be realistic, and it's like our quarterback situation is so bad, at least from what I'm seeing, that it probably will hold us back. But then again, it also, like, it was no different, if not worse, last season, and they were in the playoff hunt at the end, coming off of starting, like 4-6, or maybe like 3-5 or something like that with Josh McDaniels.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were 3 games under, and then Antonio Pierce brought them up to like almost 500. Maybe they were 2 games under, whatever they were, right? But again, if the team can play hard for them like that, and you get the whole offseason, new offensive coordinator, hopefully it's a little bit more efficient and interesting, and you have a new weapon in Brock Bowers, not Brock Purdy, and maybe it is better. My ceiling. Okay, for a final answer here, my ceiling is 10 wins.
10 wins?
10 wins. My genuine prediction. Oh man, that's so hard. It's between 8 and 9. Can I just say 8 to 9 wins? Like 8.5. I'll just say 8.5 wins. That's my prediction. Like right at 500.
Okay.
And then my floor is 6 wins.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and say my floor is going to be 5 wins. I'm going to keep I'm going to change my ceiling. I'm going to change my ceiling a little bit to like narrow the gap. I had it at 12-5 back in May. I'm going to say 11 wins is the ceiling. So that would put them at 11-6, probably making the playoffs. In terms of my prediction, my new prediction, I'm going to put them at 8-9.
Yep.
Just because I can see them like winning. They have a bunch of winnable games. They've got the Broncos twice. You never know what the Chargers are going to be late in the season. I have an opinion about week 1, but we'll save that for the next show. The Ravens are going to be tough. The Panthers, that's a very winnable game. Browns is going to be tough because of that defense. Steelers, that's a winnable game because that offense isn't that great. Rams is going to be tough. Chiefs, the Raiders seem to match up well with the Chiefs, but I think that's pretty tough regardless of matchup. Gardner Minshew on the Raiders beating the Chiefs. I don't know. We'll have to see how that plays out. Bengals going to be tough. Dolphins going to be tough. Buccaneers, it's a winnable game. Might be a little bit tough. Falcons should be tougher than what we thought. But then again, we don't know about Kirk Cousins' injury, and that's week 15, so we'll see. Jaguars, we don't know exactly what they're going to be. Could be a winnable game, or they could be much better than last year. Saints should be a very winnable game. So I'm going to go ahead. I lowered the floor and the ceiling a little bit, and my prediction is 8-9.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's all fair. I'm having a hard time between my genuine prediction of 8-9 wins, so I just went right in the middle, and then the ceiling of 10-11 wins. I'm having a hard time of but I'm just keep it at 10.
Mm-hmm. Really quickly, Papa J brings up a good point that I didn't even think of. Bo Nix is going to be the starting quarterback, so there will be a little bit of a difference, than last year at least.
Yeah. I think they should be better just by natural progression under a coach in a second year with them.
Mm-hmm. And Joel is, talking about your point. You said the reason to move off of Derek Carr was to get the long-term guy, and you guys have had 5 quarterbacks start, for the Raiders since Carr.
Yeah,
Carr was not the answer though. I hold true to that, but the whole, like you said, the whole reason to move on was to move on, not to recycle
go back into purgatory for 10 years. No. Yeah.
So
one thing I saw a post. I want to say it's the 33rd team on Twitter. I don't know if you have seen them or follow them, but
yeah.
They post some good stuff, like a lot of good stats and whatnot. But then there was one where it was like maybe a team just cut a quarterback or somebody got injured or something, and it was like, here are 5 quarterbacks that are still available as free agents, and it was like, it was the Titan, Ryan Tannehill, a bunch of older quarterbacks. Could be an interesting one, I forget, and then like the third guy. Why am I forgetting his name? Oh, that's so annoying. I'm so sorry. This is horribly delivered. The guy that started for the Raiders last year, Brian Hoyer. They're like, here are 5 interesting options if team needs a quarterback. I was like, I quote tweeted, I was like, I can confirm Brian Hoyer is not an interesting option for any fucking team. Jesus Christ. The fact that he was one of those 5 guys is just, that was Josh McDaniels to a T. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know who would have ever thought that Brian Hoyer would ever be a Pro Bowler, ever.
Mm-hmm.
Don't look at my Twitter and don't look up Brian Hoyer,
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, Brian Hoyer used to be the quarterback of the 49ers back in 2017 in Shanahan's first year. And I went to an open practice, and Brian Hoyer balled out in the open practice. And I tweeted, the worst tweet of all time. I said something about, I think Brian Hoyer is going to be a Pro Bowl quarterback this year. Or I said, don't be surprised if Brian Hoyer is a Pro Bowl quarterback. And I think he proceeded to win 0 games for the team. And CJ Beathard won the first game against the Giants. I was there. That was the Marquise Goodwin, long touchdown after, unfortunately his wife had a miscarriage in the morning, and Marquise Goodwin went down to his knees and was praying. So, just to give good context, And Papa J says, I wasn't the only one that thought that Brian Hoyer was going to be good. I do remember that offseason. It was like, all right, the 49ers have like 2 options here. They can either get Brian Hoyer or Jay Cutler. And I'm like, oh, I want Jay Cutler. And then we got Brian Hoyer. Well, yeah, I always wanted Brian Hoyer. He's a better quarterback anyway. No.
Yeah.
But
that's how I felt with Gardner Minshew this year. It was like, well, we could get Gardner Minshew, or I already forget who the top free agent quarterback was. I guess Kirk Cousins. And then we got Gardner Minshew. And I didn't kind of trick myself into liking it. I was just like, all right, well, there's your emergency quarterback, I guess. I'm looking forward to the draft. So
Joel says, we need our defense to live up to the tail end of last year, in which they didn't look good in the preseason.
Yep. And to the previous comments point about Bo Nix, I feel like Bo Nix could be a guy that could do what Trey Lance did to the defense in week 2 of the preseason, where it's just dink and dunk, efficient. The defense is just playing nice, soft coverage. All right, fine, we'll let you do it. You're just not going to kill us. And then suddenly they're going to be in the red zone, and we're going to be sitting there watching the game going, what the fuck is happening? This is so annoying. It's going to suck. It's going to happen. It's going to suck.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, I think the defense still will be good. I've chilled on the worry. I just think there's going to be games. I don't know. It's the I have that bad Raiders, It's always the Raiders. This is how the Raiders are. The defense always sucks. I hope they can keep it consistent and stay good. That'd be reason enough to keep Pierce, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. So, really quickly, I want you to name maybe a player or 2 that you have as breakout candidates, or, list off a couple if you have a couple.
Yeah. I think unless you have any other ideas, I would say we just go breakouts, MVP, and then we can move on to the Niners. I don't know if there were any other options. All right, cool. So I'll give maybe I'll give 2 breakouts. The first one is kind of the given one. It's Brock Bowers. I mean, he's new to the team. He's a first-round rookie. The dude's going to be explosive. I'm so excited to see him week 1 and 2 and 3 and so forth. I actually just had a dynasty rookie draft this past weekend, and I was the reigning champion in that league. It was the first year in existence.
Not in the league that I'm in.
No, that's not a dynasty league. That is a redraft. But in this dynasty league, I had the 12th pick out of 12 players, and somehow, some way, Brock Bowers fell to 12, even though he was the 6th ranked player. So I was hoping for a wide receiver, but I took Bowers in an instant, and I'm excited about it. But my other breakout player, this would be my genuine, if you had to ask me, give me one player who is the breakout guy this year, it's Trevon Merrick, free safety on the defense. I think not only from what I saw in the preseason, but also the fact that he's on a contract year, he needs to prove himself to get that money. He's literally going to be playing for his life. And from what I saw in the preseason, it's going to be real nice to watch. He is all over the field. He was getting all the tackles. He hasn't been that ball hawking safety. And maybe it was just the quarterbacks being that bad in training camp. But Trevon Merrick, I saw multiple times from reporters at training camp saying, oh, another interception for Trevon Merrick. It was between Merrick and Jack Jones. They were getting all of the interceptions, all of them. So I don't know. I think Trevon Merrick's going to break out. I really hope he's a Pro Bowler this year, and I hope he puts himself on the map not only for Raider fans but for the NFL. And I hope the Raiders keep him.
Mhm.
So
My breakout player, I've really got two of them. I've really got two breakout players for the Raiders, and my breakout players are. I think the obvious answer, you already named him, is Brock Bowers. I think like I've heard nothing about him being a red zone target, like a favorite target in the red zone for the Raiders in training camp. And I think like also he's in a position where, I would say like no disrespect to Gardner Minshew or to Aiden O'Connell, but like I'd say quarterbacks who are struggling a little bit tend to favor tight ends as like a safety blanket, because I'd say tight ends probably run a little bit more of a simple route tree than wide receivers do. Like wide receivers are able to be more agile and run a little bit more dynamic routes, more complex routes. And then tight ends, it's like, it's pretty limited, and sometimes they can go under the radar. I think Brock Bowers will probably be used a little bit, more than just lined up at tight end, but I've heard nothing but great things about him and how he's one of the greatest tight end prospects that we've seen. I know him and Kyle Pitts were up there, so like, I'd say Brock Bowers' floor is like what we've seen out of Kyle Pitts, from the past couple of years. Like the talent is there. It's just whether or not the usage is going to be there, and if the quarterback can keep up.
I think the usage in the sense of being like, positioned in different places, the usage will be there in that sense, like you said, of like, he's not only going to be a tight end in line, he'll be in the slot, he'll be out wide. They had him at fullback. They might hand off the ball to him a couple times because he can do it. It's just a matter of, is there too many, mouths to feed in this offense right now with Davante Adams, who will probably garner 30% of the target share, get like at least 140 targets or so. He should catch around 100 passes again if everything's right. But then Jacoby Myers is a very worthy wide receiver too. I think he could be a wide receiver 1 on some teams. And now Trey Tucker is showing out in the preseason. He should be the slot receiver. He might take targets from Brock Bowers. It might be a give and take there. So, and Michael Mayer. So, a lot of mouths to feed.
Then I can 100% like see it with the Raiders that at the end of the season, it is going to be, oh yeah, well, we just need to build this offense around Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers has showed that, he can carry the offense on his back. He's a dynamic weapon. We just need a guy who can give it to him. I can see it now. I'm seeing the future.
I'm already mentally there. I'm already there to where all this Davante Adams talk, I'm like, well, if they don't trade him week 7 or whenever the trade deadline is, I can see him being traded next offseason because his contract suddenly has no guarantees and he demands a new contract. And they're in this situation where it's like, well, we're looking for a quarterback and blah, 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 blah. We need to acquire picks. He's the perfect candidate to get traded. And then you have Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers. You can get it done with that. I can totally see Brock Bowers being the guy starting next season. Continue.
Mm-hmm. Starting this season?
2025.
Okay.
As long as Davante's there, he's number 1.
My other breakout player is going to be Zamir White, because I think that Zamir White, I think he's a pretty talented running back, maybe not to the level of Josh Jacobs, but this strikes me as a team that is going to want to run the ball. They drafted Jackson Powers Johnson, so they at least invested a little bit into the offensive line. I don't know. This to me kind of screams a little bit of a smash mouth football team. They'll try to they will just try to control the time of possession, win the game on the ground, and throw when they need to. And, if everything goes right, Davante Adams will be open. If you run the ball successfully, Davante Adams already creates separation when they know it's going to go to him. So, I don't know. I can see Zamir White being a breakout player. Maybe not to the level of Josh Jacobs two years ago, but you never know.
Yeah, not he won't be leading the league, but he could be a 1,000-yard rusher, get around maybe 10 touchdowns. Who knows? You know,
Yeah.
I do agree they're going to want to run the ball. So, in fact, that was something that Luke Getzey is very well known for. It's actually two things: it's running the ball as much as possible and targeting tight ends. So,
Hmm.
uh, but now we can move on to our MVP picks.
Yes. So let's talk about our team MVP picks. Mike, I will let you go first.
Okay.
So this is just for the
Well,
Raiders. Just so
yeah,
if anybody's watching and not seeing the screen, Raiders 2024 team MVP.
yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, the obvious answer is Max Crosby, and I'm not gonna say that just because that's less interesting. Uh, but I'll give some options before I give my guy. Obviously, Max Crosby. Right next to him, Christian Wilkins. I think Malcolm Kuntz is a solid option for like their team MVP, where maybe because Crosby and Wilkins are getting doubled, Malcolm Kuntz is just the cleanup guy, and he's the guy that gets 12 sacks, maybe more, maybe 16 sacks. I could see it. And then he's a guy that earns the big contract coming out of the season. Uh, Nate Hobbs. Colton Miller, if he stays healthy, keeping the quarterback on his feet, I'll put his name in there, right? And then
Mhm.
there's Devonte Adams. Um, and I would say the last name that I'll throw in there is Jack Jones, just because I didn't get to really say him as a breakout. I think he broke out last year. Um,
Yeah. Did you know he's a 74 on Madden?
he's let it be known, that's for sure. And I would say, yeah, he should be like at least a 84. I mean, from what I've seen, but it's a small hand or a small amount. So
Joel says Trevon Merrick.
it's funny. Like I said all those names, and I'm looking at the roster and the starters. I'll even give a little nod to Robert Spillane as an option too. But my heart does want to go to Trevon Merrick. I really think he might just kill it on the defense. But I lied earlier. It's Max Crosby. Let's be honest. I mean, this team lives and dies, I think, by Max Crosby. Um, if God forbid, knock on the hardest wood that you have, he were to,
Pause.
yes, um, if he were to, whatever happened to him and he can't play, this team is, if it were week one, it's below the floor. It's not 6 wins. We're looking at like, oh, we might get our quarterback of the future now. I think
Yeah.
it's that serious. So
Yeah, I'm with you with the only pick that I have is Max Crosby. I think he is the most valuable player on the team because, I mean, Grant was just on with us and admitted to 49er fans everywhere that Max Crosby is better than Nick Bosa. So, I mean, you and I have had that discussion or that debate for a couple years now, and it's not even like I don't even think I can really refute it. Like Max Crosby is a badass, and he has developed into this like he is a relentless pass rusher, and I mean, he's so quick. Like while I do love the skill set that Nick Bosa has, Max Crosby I feel like gets closes the gap between him and the quarterback a lot quicker than Nick Bosa does. Like if you watch both of them side by side, like they're kind of different players. They're both
yeah,
pass rush specialists, but I think Crosby might be a little bit better against the run. But I feel like if you were to look at both of them, Bosa might be maybe probably a little bit more powerful, but Crosby I think is a little bit quicker. I think I like Bosa kind of looks like in slow motion if you were to like just thinking about it in my mind, like the two side by side. I think Crosby's that quick.
yeah.
But
And
like
he
you
has like
said,
that relentlessness to him too,
well, I think
just
both of them.
nonstop.
I think
For sure, for
both are
sure.
excellent players.
Yeah,
But what I will say is, for Nick Bosa, I mean for Max Crosby, if Crosby were to go down, the Raiders are going down, and more, I guess, emphasis. Max Crosby is the Raiders defense. He is.
Yep. Yeah.
Without him,
yeah.
it's going to fall apart. So he's the team MVP in my opinion.
Yeah. 1000%.
Joel says Max Defensive Player of the Year. My only issue with that, it's not that he wouldn't be deserving of a Defensive Player of the Year. Like, if you stuck Max Crosby on the Chiefs, on the Bengals, on the Ravens, on the 49ers, he would have won one already, I think. The reason why he hasn't gotten the recognition of like NFL honors is because he's on a team that hasn't been very successful, with the Raiders.
Yeah, I think if he were to win Defensive Player of the Year, I think he would have to go down a path very similar to Khalil Mack, which would be miraculous season. Holy shit, they made the playoffs in large part because of this guy. And in 2016, that was Khalil Mack. It was like, this guy is unstoppable. Every time it's fourth down and the game's on the line, he makes the play, all those things, But at the end of the day, the Raiders made the playoffs that year. And I think the Defensive Player of the Year award kind of showed for that, for Khalil Mack, So if they made the playoffs this year, oh, yeah, he's in the running. It's just at that point, what are his stats, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just want to quickly clarify, I love Nick Bosa, okay? I think, he's a tremendous player and, deserved that contract. And I think he deserved the Defensive Player of the Year. But when comparing two different players, if you asked me to pick one, I think I see Crosby making a bigger impact on his team than I see Nick Bosa making an impact on his team. And I think that could also be a product of how good the 49ers other defenders are, as opposed to Crosby is the diamond in the rough there, or has been the diamond in the rough consistently.